Good morning, or afternoon, or evening. We'll be getting started in a little bit. Yay! Yeah, thank you guys for letting me have the freedom to just surprise you with the topic. So, the last couple days I've been having fun painting these kind of funky summery fruit things, so I think we're going to do that today. I am doing pretty good this morning. How's everyone doing? Hi, Kale. How are you? I've even pulled out my watercolor pencils so that I can sketch with these on one of them. Hi. We're going to get started in just a few minutes. If you see a fruit in here particularly that you want me to make sure I do, please let me know in the comments. Other than that, I will just kind of do whatever fruits come to me. Oh, you finally finished your cross-country trip? That sounded like a lot of driving. I used to be, well, I'm still not great at road trips, but it used to be a lot worse. I've gotten better in the last couple years. Love the watermelon. All right, cool. All right, we've got just a few minutes. So I'm going to be using dry palettes today. And I am mentioning palettes multiple because I will be using my go-to. This is Shin Han & Core in here. But I might, so you guys can see it, I did buy from Stuart Simple quite some time ago, and I haven't painted much with it. But I'm curious, this is supposed to be one of the coloriest ones, watercolor palettes. I'm wondering if some of these colors would be fun in there. So I might throw some of those in there. I haven't decided yet. For these, you can work on pretty much any size. I've got two different sheets under here. One is an 8x10 and one is an 8x8 size. All right, it's officially 11, so let's go ahead and get started. For those of you, if anybody is new, my name is Lacey Walker. I am the artist behind Rebel Unicorn Crafts. We're going to be painting together today, and I will be kind of narrating what I'm doing so you can follow along. And I love, after the class, if you send me pictures, you can do that. Well, you can make a video too. I love to see those, but I know they're more effort. So if you want to, you can send them to me through Instagram, either Lacey Walker Art or Rebel Unicorn Crafts. Do you like the watercolor brush pens that like you get with koi? Are you talking about something like one of these? So I don't know if anybody who's on here saw my recent koi test where I wasn't super happy with the koi colors. And the set I got did not come with these, but I do have some of these separately. And I like these for travel, and I like these for some things, but in general, I just usually stick to my normal brush. But I do like these. I think they work really well. I think they're really good for beginners because you can do really easy gradients and things like that, and they're super portable. So if I am traveling or going on a little vacation, I don't want to take a bunch of stuff, I'll take a little palette and then just one or two of these, and then they're super easy to use. I've got a bug floating in this one. I did, the last time I used this, I was outside, so that makes a little more sense. All right, so my goal for today is one of the things I've been trying to do is really kind of loosen up in watercolor, because I think that sometimes that's the most beautiful part of watercolor. And a lot of my classes are fairly loose, but we're really going to be kind of like stressing the looseness versus having some control in this class, and these are super fun to do. So let's actually get started. I'm going to tape mine down. I didn't actually tape those ones down that were there, but you know, for the sake of this class, I was just experimenting. I am going to tape these down because we'll use a decent amount of water today, so we want to make sure that it's not going to buckle too much. But you could definitely do this in a sketchbook. And with one of these, I'm going to use a pencil, and one I will use watercolor pencils, so we can see the difference of when you sketch with a pencil versus with the watercolor pencil. And if you've got questions during the class, please feel free to just write them in the comments. I try my best to keep an eye on the comments. Sometimes I lose a little bit of track, so I will do my best. But go ahead and ask questions in real time. So I'm using a 140-pound weight watercolor paper. I don't know if anybody saw it. This is not that Arches paper. I do love the Arches paper, but you know, it is pricey. So when I am just having a little bit of a play or teaching a class, I use this. And you know, this is the same paper here, and I think I got really nice colors here. So I will. I'm not going to get rid of all my other paper in lieu of Arches. So go ahead and prep anything that you're going to prep. Make sure you've got water, you've got something to transfer clean water with, either a spray bottle or a pipette. As usual, I will be primarily using a round brush to paint with. Any brush you have will be fine today because we're trying to just go with the flow. Maybe even try using a brush that's a little out of your comfort zone, maybe a little larger than what you would use if you have an assortment of brushes, to try to get yourself out of that comfort zone. You can absolutely use a block for this. Tips to prevent warping: tape it down. Yeah, just tape it down will help with that a lot. You can also use a hair dryer to dry, and that will help reduce the warping too. And then when you're done, you can either sandwich them between heavy books, or you can actually iron your paintings. So I haven't done that with those. All right, so for this first one, where is my pencil? Just had it. There we go. I'm going to draw with the pencil on this first one, and on the second one I will use watercolor pencils so that we can see the difference between the two. Somebody did say, oh, hello. Let's start with some of these. We're going to do something a little similar to this one on this one so that we can get some of the watermelon in there. So watermelons are super easy to paint and draw, thankfully. I know that sometimes that's kind of the hard part, but just start by making, you know, a triangle type shape and round it off on the bottom. This doesn't need to be perfect. Now, draw light here, but I'm going to have to draw a little bit darker so you guys can actually see what I'm doing. So let's go ahead and really draw this dark. Yours should be a lot lighter than this. This is the bottom rind, and then I also like to kind of just give myself a little delineation of where I know where it's going to transition from the pink to the white to the green here. So it kind of looks like a slice of pizza at this point. Iron on what setting? I think most of these papers are cotton, so you can actually just use the cotton setting. I did put 2 pieces of parchment paper on either side of it to protect it. when I iron. Or you can even put like a towel on top. All right, let's put in another watermelon here. And this one's going to go slightly off. And round the bottom. You can place your fruits wherever you want them. These don't need to be perfect. You don't need to make sure you're, if you want to, you can, but you don't need to get out a ruler or anything like that. And let's do one more in this direction, over here. All right, I've got my 3 pieces of pizza looking things here. Let's throw in some blueberries because I love eating fruit salads that have blueberries and watermelon in them. So the textures are so interesting. Blueberries are super round, so you can, depending on the direction that they're facing, maybe you just have one that's just round, and maybe this will actually have that little button on the bottom. Maybe you throw in another one here, but you can see that top part that's a little bit squiggly to the side. Maybe there's another one here where that top part is visible from the top down. Throw in a couple of these around. Oh, hello. I understand it's late. I will upload this live to YouTube afterwards in case you have to duck out or you just can't make it. Let's throw in a couple other blueberries. Do as many as you want. And vary the position that they're going to be in so that you have some variety of what direction they are facing. I'm going to throw in one that's going to be a little behind this one. And let's make its little... What's that top part called? That's kind of where the flower was, right? Let's even put one more here. Just going to barely overlap, and that one's a little button one. You can put in as many as you want. You can make them overlap. You can see here I'm not being super careful with how I do this. Just place these in here. Okay. Alright, so this is what I'm going to have as my main part of my drawing part. And I did this one with pencil, and let's actually start painting on this one before I draw up another one. So I'm going to start with the watermelons. Now I did use a different palette for this, but this is one I'm testing out that I'm not sure anybody has access to, so I'm not going to use these same colors that are in this because these ones are super bright, and I don't know if you'll have access to it. So I'm going to try to do it mainly with the ones from my palette, colors that I think most people will have in their palette or similar colors. Alright, again, we're trying to get real loosey-goosey here. So I am going to mix up a little bit of a pink type color, put a little bit of clean water here. And I forgot I need to actually spritz all my colors so that they are ready to go when I am ready to go into them. Washing my brush to make sure I don't have any residue from last night's painting session. And I'm going to actually start by grabbing some of this quinacridone magenta. I'm not going to lie, it's less fun to say quinacridone when I don't mess it up, now that I know how to say it. Now, I usually have tester strips, and you can absolutely test your colors here if you want to, but you don't have to today because we're trying to loosen up. So, I'm actually going to put in a little bit of this bright orange color into this because I want to kind of make it a little bit more orangey. And then let's mix up one other color here too that's a little bit more red. So I think this is Crimson Lake. And I just want to have a couple of these here, plus I want to have access to my colors to plop in as I see fit. Okay, so I've got my water over here. Just off camera, it's hard for me to fit everything in, so you'll have to use your imagination a little bit. But I want that there so that I have access to some clean water so that I can actually make a little bit of a gradient. We don't need to be super careful. This is not like a drip line technique or anything. We're just going in. So I've got some of this red-ish color. The opening of a blueberry is called a calyx. Cool. I've got some of this reddish color still in my brush, and I'm just going to go ahead and start to kind of fill in those lines, and I'm not going to be super careful. I'm going to wash my brush off. And now I just have clean water in here, and I'm just going to kind of touch that to the bottom, kind of to that point where the, the pizza slice, the crust would be basically. And then I'm going to grab some of this pink I mixed up and drop that in a few areas. And then let's actually take some of this quinacridone magenta, put it straight from our pan or your tube if you put a little bit of on your palette, and then let's really concentrate some of bright colors towards the kind of center part. Oh yeah. I'm going to let that set for just a second to kind of see what's happening here. Now, when you work with watercolor, it is good to have some sort of a light source. I mean, obviously, you're more than likely going to be painting somewhere with a light source, but if you can get a reflection so that you can actually see how dry things are, because if you want to do things like encourage blooms, which I did in this painting, you can see one here and here. You want to wait until that paper becomes more mattified before you just drop some water in. So let's see what happens when you just drop some water in. You're going to start to get some of those blooming effects in there, and that can be super pretty. I think I want to add in a little bit more red. I'm going to grab some of this Crimson Lake, I think is what this color is, but a little bit more concentrated. And while it's still wet or damp, let's just pop that in a couple areas here. We're concentrating most of the color towards the top, because watermelon does generally get a little bit lighter as you get to the bottom. Now, I've got mine pretty dark down here, so I'm going to actually wash my brush off and try to lift up a little bit of that pigment. Just wash it, dry it, and then slide it over there. Oops, I went over. That's alright. I'm going to paint a background on this, so it's fine. And that's going to help lift that up a little bit. Now we can either add in some more color. I'm going to plop in a little bit more of that brightness because I do like them to be super bright. And I'm going straight into my quinacridone magenta that I put a little bit of water in so that it's a little bit ready to give up its pigment. And now we've got one watermelon part done. Oh, hello, hello, welcome. We are just painting together today. We're doing some fruits. Alright, and we're going to start this again, starting with, well, you can do this, you could change and go pink before red, but I'm going to do it the same way, where I start with some of this red, just placing it down, washing my brush off so that I have just some water in here to thin it out so it gets lighter as it goes down. Grab some of my pink, put that in, and then go straight into some of these red and pink colors. You could throw in a little, ooh, that was fun. You could throw in a little bit of orange or something if you wanted to put some surprising colors in. Let's see what happens if I put this in. That's kind of nice. And again, I don't want this to be super dark down here at the bottom, so I'm going to wash my brush off, dry it, and then swipe to kind of pick up some of that extra pigment. If you want to, you can fill in those gaps. You don't have to. And I'm gonna put some more color in here. Maybe a little bit more of that red. Just really have a good play. Now, this one over here is a little bit flatter than I want it to be, so I'm going to, before this one dries, I still have a little bit of dampness here where if I want to, I can drop some water in here and it'll do some fun, interesting things in there. So I'm going to do that. You don't have to do any of this, but really give yourself kind of some freedom to play. And let's do the same thing over here. Let's drop in just some water. Let it just do its thing. the more interesting textures we get, the more it'll be kind of fun to look at. And we've got one more watermelon over here. Let's make this one even brighter. I'm going to grab some pink here with some yellow. More pink. And see if this will help us brighten this up a little bit. Ooh, that's very red. That is a little more watermelon-y colored. Again, I'm washing my brush off and just kind of pulling some of this down. Maybe wash it off and pull it down even more. And then drop in some color. Wash my brush again, pull up that extra so that I get that little bit of a gradient at the bottom. It doesn't need to be perfect. And again, I'm going to drop in a little bit of water. I really like when it gets that texture. Those blooms in there I think are really pretty. And they kind of remind me, like, when you open a watermelon, you know how it has those swirl patterns on the inside where it has a slightly different texture? Kind of reminds me of that. Now, I did say it doesn't have to be perfect, and it doesn't, but I do want that to be, I don't want it to cut off. I want it to kind of still look like it's part of that. So just going to fill in those gaps there. Cool. All right, before we do anything else to the watermelon, I'm going to let this dry a little bit because I want to add in some green to the bottom, and I'm going to do a gradient, but if we let this dry first, we'll be safer so we don't get green running into our bright pinky colors, which will then make some sort of a brown. So I'm going to let it chill, and I'm actually going to work on a blueberry. And for the blueberry, I'm not actually really going to mix up many colors. I'm mainly going to be dipping into these, and I might kind of squeegee my brush off over here to mix a couple colors together, but I'm not going to mix up any large quantities like I did for the watermelon because they're smaller and we want these to be a little bit more free-flowing. So what I'm going to do, let's start with this one where the little bottom part is, the little button. I'm just going to take a wet brush and I'm just going to wet inside this blueberry. So there's just water in here. You could do this with a color if you want to have an easier way to keep track of where it is, or you can use the light source to kind of check where it is. Then, I'm going to grab some blue. Let's take this phthalo blue. This is going to be super bright, probably not quite what I want, but it will be good for kind of under the painting. And we want to create a little bit of shadow along the edges, so put some of that around a few of those sides. Maybe even in that center part, because that center part does dip down a little bit too. And then I'm going to wash my brush and dry it again. And I'm going to take some of that out so that around the center part of that rim, it's going to still have some lightness to it. We can do the same thing with grabbing some violet, mixing it into that blue, and add that in a couple areas. So we've got a couple different variations of color. I've got a red violet here that I think would be really pretty to pop into one area. You know how sometimes blueberries, that waxy coating starts to kind of fade off on them, and it kind of shines through this really pretty color. I'm going to leave that at like that for now, and I'm going to start on another blueberry. I'm probably going to do a couple different layers on most of these blueberries. But let's go over here. So on this one, we don't have the little button in the middle, so it's not going to have that divot, but it does have it at the top. But we want to concentrate that color, the darker colors around the bottom, especially on kind of one side and then up here. So let's grab some of this color. We're already, ooh, I forgot to wet it. Wash your brush off and put some water right in there. Again, we're not being super duper careful. Just putting it in about where that is. I'm I'm going to grab some blue, mix it into some of these purpley colors over here. And I'm just going to put that right along. So we're going wet into wet. I'm going to tap that up here too. Wash my brush. I tapped it off so it's a little bit dry, or it's just barely damp. I'm going to pull up some of that. And again, let's put in some of these fun colors. Maybe add in a magenta color. Maybe add in a violet type color. We want there to be a little bit of color all throughout this, but not as much on one side because that's basically where there's going to be a highlight. If you've got too much water, you can suck up some of that. And then, you know, I do want a more muted blue, so I'm going to go ahead and over here grab some phthalo blue, and then let's actually grab maybe a little bit of orange. That was too much. I don't want it that muted. That's just gray. Let's put some more blue in there. So that was phthalo blue. I'm also going to grab some of this ultramarine blue. There we go. That's a nice blue color. Dark, dark. And let's really put that down here, like there's a real shadow on this blueberry. There'd be a shadow underneath where the calyx, is that what it is? And let's leave that like that for now. This will kind of change as it sits, and that's totally fine. All right, you know the drill now. So wash your brush. Wet in this area. Oh, I already had a little bit of blue in there. That's all right. And you know, we can actually do one thing that's a little bit easier too is if you batch some of these, because if you do 2 or 3 at once where you put the water in, you can kind of go back and forth between them and let the water soak in and kind of control some of the effects. But you do want to work on, like you don't want to work on the one that's next to it right when you're working on this so that they don't flow together, because you'll lose some of the illusion of the roundness. So I'm going to do these 3. This one, this one, and this one. And I'm going to do the same thing where I grab some of that dark color and kind of put it along some of those edges. In this one and the top one where there's going to be that center part, we also want to drop some darkness in there. And then before I put any more color in there, I want to lift out around kind of the round part. So I've washed my brush, dried it off, and I am just lifting out a little bit of that pigment. Not a ton, just a little bit. I'm going to go in with some of that brighter phthalo blue because I think it's going to be really pretty when it shines through, and put this around a few of the edges. And again, I'm going to grab some of that red violet. Ooh, that is, I put it right in the blue, and then I was surprised that it wasn't red violet. Not sure why. But let's put a little bit of that in here. I have a little bit too much in my brush. Let's put some of that here, and then right over here too. Okay, again, I'm going to let these sit a little bit. And I'm going to move on to doing these 2 over here. Wash my brush off so I've got water. Put that water in these 2. And then let's grab some of that pigment and put it right around the edge. One thing you can play with here is try to find the edge of where you put your water. And try dropping it in where there already is water, and then try going outside the line a little bit to see how it differs where it's in the line versus out of the line and touching the line. That will give you a little bit different effects. Grab some more blues, do the same thing. Put a little bit in there. And then dry my brush off, grab some of that pigment before I drop in some of that red-violet color. I'm just grabbing the scraps that are on here. And you can put it in multiple spots or just a few. And there's our first layer of most of our blueberries. The ones that I've put behind, I need to wait for just a minute before I can do my first layer on them. So I'm going to actually work on the rinds of the watermelon. Okay, so I have made a big mess out of my palette, and I want to actually kind of mix up a little bit of some green as my base color. I will be dipping into the pans too, but I like to kind of have like a target green color. So I'm actually just going to take a damp paper towel and just grab that pigment from here, because I don't think I'm going to be using that color again. I'm going to put a little water in there, fresh water. And then I'm going to grab some of this. This is yellow-green. I will be dropping in some of this straight yellow-green into this because I like the brightness, but I want it to be a little bit more of a darker green, a little more subdued. So I'm also going to grab some of that Viridian and mix that in here. And just so you guys can see, I want that to be a little bit more muted than that, so I'm going to grab, let's put, I think this is burnt sienna. I really need to swatch these and know what colors are in here, but I think that's burnt sienna. And just to tone that down a little bit. Yeah, that's the green color I personally want. So, alright, you probably know the drill, but I'm going to explain a couple things here in case you are brand new. One of the reasons why I tape these down, well, one is I can control the direction that this is going to go, where the water flows. The other is taping it down is going to reduce some of the warping and buckling. And the last reason is I can spin this around. So for me, it's very unnatural to make a curve in this shape, but it's pretty natural for me to go like this. So in order to do that, I'm actually going to flip this around so that this curve is going to be kind of at the top part of all of these before I attempt to do this. Now you might work in a different way and you might have different preferences, and that's totally fine, but that's just one of the reasons why I really like taping these down. So I'm going to grab a little bit of this green in my brush and I'm just going to swipe it across here. And again, I'm going to wash my brush off and I'm going to take that damp brush and just soften the edges of that so we get a nice little gradient there. Then I'm going to grab some of this super bright yellow-green and I'm going to touch it in a couple places here so we get a real bright color. I'm also going to go straight into that Viridian, because you know how watermelons have those little squiggles? We can kind of hint to the fact that they do here. Oops, if you go out a little bit, that's alright. Wash my brush off so I don't have a bunch of that green still in there. And just touch until you kind of are happy with the way your rind looks. And I wish I hadn't, well, obviously I did this so that you guys can see, but if this line was a lot lighter, this would look a lot better. But, we're going with it. All right, so now I'm going to flip it over again so that this curve, I'm going to do the same thing to this one. Now, do be careful if you're flipping yours around that if you like something that's happening, like if it's spreading up and you really like that, don't flip it so that it goes like this, because then it's not going to do that. Wait until it's soaked in a little bit more. If you still have running water, be a little bit careful about just flipping your sheet all around. Okay, grabbing some of this green here. Again, we're going to make kind of a green swipe here, wash our brush so that we have some nice clean water in it, tap it off so it's a little bit damp, and then just create a little bit of a gradient by just doing a clean water swipe, and then we're going to drop in some real bright colors again. Starting with that lime green, or lemon yellow green. Grabbing a little of that Viridian, and while this is all still damp, touching that in, and there we go. We got one more to do that too. So again, washing my brush off. I flipped this so that I've got the curve. Grabbing some of this Target green color that I had, just kind of the basic one. Swipe at the top. Wash my brush. Tap it off so that it is damp. And then just swipe so that it creates this nice little gradient. Go in with whatever extra green colors you're adding to the very outside, because that's the most colorful part. You know, a lot of the watermelon rind is mainly kind of a white color, so we really want to concentrate most of the color of the watermelon kind of on that flesh. I love watermelon so much. When I lived in Australia, I lived like over a mile away from a grocery store, and I would walk to the grocery store and I would still buy huge watermelons and then carry them all the way back because I love watermelon that much. And they have the best watermelon I've ever had. All right. My watermelons are pretty well sorted, but I need to finish putting in some color in these other blueberries that were overlapping. Mine are dry enough to do this. If yours are still damp, either take a hairdryer and blow dry them, because if they're damp at all, they're going to run into each other, and then you're not going to get kind of the delineation between the two different shapes. So I'm going to wash my brush pretty well because I've just had green in there, and that's not the color I want. And then I'm going to drop in my water. I'm going to put a little bit of pigment in here so you can actually see how I'm doing this. You can either add pigment or not. But, you know, I can touch these together a little bit because they are dry, but I kind of want to keep them separate. So I'm going to do these two here. Just drop that water in. And then this darker color over here, I'm going to really make sure I concentrate that around these edges where that overlaps, because that's where you're going to really get some really dark shadows, is some of those overlaps. Yeah, we still want to go around the edges and that little button area, but we really want to concentrate some of that shadow right along the edge here. So maybe even throw in, you know, a violet or something right there to really indicate that there's a shadow at that base of that, so that they look like they're a little bit separated. Just dropping in little bits and just letting it do its thing. We're really just learning how watercolor moves and just letting it be and letting it live its best watercolor life. Just dropping in a little bit more color. And then usually there's one kind of shiny bright spot on them, so that's where you want to try to keep some area open, here or here. Oh, well, I hope that you are trying them out. Yeah, I love doing watercolor, and I really, you know, my favorite thing is well, seeing you guys get excited about watercolor, because it really does make my day. All right, grabbing these other blueberries here. I'm gonna do this to these. Oh, I got a moogie here. Let me start again. And we're just putting some of that in here. I actually don't mind adding in the pigment here. You can do it with pigment or without. Just make sure it's light enough to where it will kind of look like, if you don't take all that pigment out, it will still kind of look like there's maybe some shiny parts on it. Again, we want to concentrate a lot of that darker color right where those two would kind of meet and overlap so that we can see the shadow of it. Around the edges, around the little button area. Grab some of those surprising colors, like that red violet. Pop those in. Grab some more blue. Pop it around the edges. I'm just grabbing whatever colors on my palette are kind of drying. That's one thing I have a hard time kind of explaining, is sometimes I really like when I I spread colors out on my palette here, and then they start to dry. So it's you might be able to hear this if I'm really quiet. So if I rub my brush like this, it doesn't make any noise. But where it's starting to dry, I think it's too faint, but it has a very slight scratchy sound. And that's where I like to get it allows me to get a really specific amount of pigment in my brush. I want to concentrate a little bit more darkness here, grabbing some violet. And let's actually add a little shadow underneath where that top part of that the blueberry fluff is. And if you have a harsh line like what I have here, I don't quite like that, so I'm going to take a damp brush and just kind of tap it. And that will kind of soften as it dries. All right. So, here's what we have so far. You guys are too nice. Yeah, I can imagine a 2-year-old would not want to have to sit through this, so I will definitely upload this afterwards. Alright, so here is where we're at currently, and we can just kind of take stock of what's happening. I'm liking my watermelons. I don't think I'm going to do anything but add some seeds in a little bit, and I want to make sure that's dry. They are dry enough to add the seeds now, but I'm going to wait because it will kind of also give us a little extra wow factor. But I want to look at our blueberries. Now, these two and these two are too wet to do a second layer on, which also means that this one and this one, we don't want to put a second layer on because we're going to risk having these colors all run together. But I am going to add in some second layers on these 5 here. So we can either do basically the same thing we did before where we wet the whole thing, or we can be a little bit more haphazard. So I'm going to take a damp brush, I'm going to grab some blues that are here. I'm going to really concentrate that kind of around the bottoms and anywhere where I feel like there are, maybe make a few little squiggles up here to show that. And maybe a little bit here, and then we're kind of doing the opposite. So now I've washed my brush, and now I'm going to try just soften some of those. I want there to be kind of that shiny spot right there, but I want it to kind of have some shadows all around it. I'm going to grab a little bit of that violet color, put a little bit more of that here. This is a pretty nice dark purple color, and hint to it a little bit there too. There, ooh, yes, I love how that blueberry looks now. All right, cool. Now I'm going to do kind of the similar thing to the other ones where I'm going to start by kind of making some of these lines with the darker colors first, which is going to do a couple things. One, because we're not working super duper fast here and these are already dry, some of these lines are going to kind of set even if you go to wet them a little bit, which is kind of nice because you'll get a little bit of texture difference. But some of them will. Okay, I like that one too. My hand's getting tired from holding this board up. Ooh, that's the one thing about the TikTok lives that does drive me a little crazy since we, do it vertically. I guess I could do it the other way, but it seems unnatural in TikTok to do it the other way. I have to show everything all in this one frame. Anyways, that is neither here nor there. Do the same thing to this. And on this one, I did not do much in the middle here, so I really want to concentrate some colors here. So I might just grab some of these blues. And the first thing I'm going to do is just kind of make those squiggles in here as kind of my interior boundary. And then I want to make a real dark color. So let's take some of these blues. Let's grab a little bit of that orange color, maybe a little bit more blue, a couple different blues. And let's drop it in the middle of where I did those squiggles so that we really get some different variation of pigment there. And then the same thing around the edges in a few spots. And I'll wash my brush off, make it so it's just damp by tapping it off. And I'm going to encourage this to blend a little bit. Grab some more of that dark color, maybe add a little bit of violet to that, and tap that around the edges again. Further concentrate. Maybe add in a couple little swoops here. There we go. That's another one. Let's see how many times I can hit my glass while I move this around. Okay. Let's do the same thing over here. Grab some of this blue or whatever colors you're kind of feeling. Try to use, your instincts of rather than follow exactly what I'm doing. Like maybe yours really needs some bright pink or something. If you're just like, ooh, I don't know why, but I really want to reach for that bright pink. Reach for it. Dry my brush off. Soften the edges. I'm going to grab some of this violet color, mix that into some of that kind of darker blue color. Drop that in a couple areas, take a damp brush and slightly wipe that off. There we go. I like that one. Do I have a suggestion? So, the next piece we're going to work on, I will be showing you my suggestion, which should make it so that we don't really see any of it. Ooh, I really like this blueberry. Ooh, I like this one too. Okay, I'm liking all of them. All right, whatever. I'm biased. I'm painting it, so obviously I like it a little bit. Doing the same thing here. Same thing on all of these. Maybe a little dot. And you know what? I think that I can do the same thing over here on this one. I think this one is good to go. So I'm going to start putting in some of these here. Take my damp brush and squiggle that off. That's a technical term, squiggle that off, Pick up a little bit of that if we need to. I'm going to grab a little bit more of this violet color and put that right on these kind of edges. Maybe hint at that in the center there too. Okay, I'm going to do that to this one. And then, do we want to work on backgrounds at the same time for both pieces, or do you guys want me to finish this piece off totally first before I move on to the second piece? Let me know in the comments, because I can kind of switch back and forth between the two. I don't know if it's helpful to let you guys catch up, so I work on two on this one, or if it's better for you to just see the whole thing from start to finish. So please let me know. All right, grabbing some darker colors, putting that in the center there. Really getting some concentrated colors here. Ooh, yeah. There we go. That's really concentrated. That's all right. Wash my brush and dry it. So I'm not going to be adding any more fruits to this painting here. I'm going to do a second one though, so we can see a different fruit, at least one more fruit. But I will be adding in the background around all of these at the end of this painting. that makes sense. There we go. All right. Ooh, okay, so most of my blueberries are pretty much done. The only ones is I need to wait for this to dry and wait for this to dry because these two here and those two there, I need to do a second layer on. Let's go ahead and add in the watermelon seeds. You can mix up a color for this. I'm just going to go into my Payne's Gray or Black. I know that not everybody likes to use black in their watercolors or in their paintings. I'm going to do it though in this because I think it's going to make my life a lot easier, and sometimes that's what it's all about. But you could mix up your own black color. So I sprayed that to get it wet, put up quite a bit on my brush, but I'm going to tap it off over here so it's not going to drip all over the rest of this. And then on these watermelons here, make sure they're dry before you do this so the black doesn't bleed into your pretty pink colors. And then we're just going to take advantage of the brush stroke in order to actually make the watermelon seeds. So you can place these however you want, but I'm going to put one here. We just take the tip of the brush and we're making two little kind of C curves. There we go, that one's better. If you need to round it at the bottom, you can. Two little, taking just the tip, rounding it out a little bit to one side, and then back. One more here. There are the seeds on that one. Then again, I like to be able to flip mine around so I can work in a more natural position. And then let's put some here too. You don't have to add seeds. Maybe you've got a seedless watermelon. I just like the contrast of the colors. Maybe that one only needs 3. No, I don't. I think it needs a couple more. Let's put one here. I don't really like the position I did of those ones. They're too kind of regular, but oh well. And on this one, let's start one that's a little further down. Alright, so I think that's a good lesson, is make sure you kind of stagger them or they look very unnatural. This looks like, I don't know, like I gave it a weird face almost. Okay, so I still can't quite do these other blueberries because they're still too wet. The ones that are in the front are too wet. But we can start talking about the background here. Pick a fun color. I don't know, maybe you want some bright yellows. Ooh, I kind of want to do like a really bright yellow background color. Maybe yellows and oranges to just kind of make everything pop out. I did do darker colors on these. I'll do a darker color on the other one, which can make these stand out, but I want to try a really light background. So use your best judgment on this. You can follow what I'm doing, or you can say, no, I liked your one previously and do this. For this one, I mixed up some different blues and some teals on this one if you want to kind of use this one as a guideline. Oh, green. Okay, so let's do greens and yellows since I wanted to do some yellows. I find it more fun to have a little variation in the background color. So, and I want bright. I'm going to grab these colors too so I can mix this up, and we do want quite a bit of color. So if you've got a little mixing well, you're going to want to have quite a bit of space and color mixed up. So I'm going to put about 2 sprays worth of water in each of these wells. Alright, I'm going to wash my brush off because it's got a bunch of that black in there and I do not want that in the background. Alright, so the suggestion is for mint green, so maybe more of a bluish green. I don't know I think mint green would be pretty on this, but I want to do that yellow, and I don't feel like mint green and yellow work together. So we're going to do something kind of in between there. So let's start. I'm going to start with some of this yellow green and mix this in here. I am going to get a tester strip just so I can make sure that I get the color that I kind of want. Yellow green, and then I'm going to grab some of this cerulean blue. I don't know why, but I feel like this is going to be a nice complementary bluish color to put into this green. get more to that tealy type color. You take it a little past that green color. Almost there, not quite. We're getting closer. I don't think we're there yet, but let's test. That is kind of a nice color. I do like that, but I want it to be... I'm kind of thinking maybe a little bit more blue. Come on, cerulean. Get in there. Okay, if you're having trouble getting pigment like me, just add in a little extra water in there so it actually has something to kind of soak that color up with. There we go. That's better. There we go. I like that color. Let's go with that color, and then I'm going to try to do some yellows. I don't know how it's going to mix together. We might need to do a little test here. It's funny how many comments I get about my voice. I always hated my voice. I feel like everybody hates their voice, though. That's pretty universal, unless you are just absolutely gifted and can sing like a bird. Anyways, here is... just going to do some really bright yellow. Let's see what happens when I mix these two colors together, because it's going to happen. Oh, that's kind of nice. I think I want it a little darker, though. And I've got quite a bit of this green that's trying to sneak in here, so I'm going to try to grab some of that so that I'm not pre-greenifying my yellow. I just want it to be a little bit more pigmented, that yellow, to be a little bit more poppy. Let's see if that did it. Not quite, need a little bit more. So this is permanent yellow. I think this one's permanent yellow deep here, and then that's a lemon yellow, and so those are the two colors I am putting in to this mixture. And then a little tiny bit of green has accidentally snuck in there. Alright, there we go. That's the brighter yellow I want. Okay. So while I did that, hopefully my blueberries are dry enough to do the second layer on these. And I think they are. I usually say don't touch, so do as I say, not as I do. But I want to make sure that they're dry enough. Okay, we're doing a second layer on these blueberries. Let's start with some of this blue. Tap around that little button area. Give a little shadow under the top fluff of the blueberry around the edges here. And then take a fairly clean brush, damp brush, and smooth those out a little bit. Not too much, just a little bit. I'm going to grab a little of that purple too. Just kind of building some layers here so that, you know, there's a little more interest in color overlaying. Grabbing some of that violet color. There. They're not perfect, but I like them. Let's move on to these ones here. I want to make sure we have time to do the other painting too. It might be a little bit more condensed, but there are a few things I was hoping to show you guys, so I want to try to make sure and do that one as well. Alright, tap off my brush. And let's add in some of this red violet. I just feel like this needs a little more pop on some of these. And maybe a little bit of this phthalo blue too. You know, blueberries are blue, but they are also a lot of different colors. Do I have any tips for drawing human bodies? No, I am terrible. Terrible at it. I do know, for a while my husband got really interested in drawing and things like that, and he was using, I think, one of the Marvel books on how to draw forms, and he seemed to really find that helpful, so maybe that's a good resource. Alright, so we want to do a background. Well, maybe you don't want to do a background. You don't have to do a background, and you could do your background however you want, but I have been liking these backgrounds where we try to kind of go around the edges, but you can see sometimes I touch the edges, sometimes I leave some of that white. It gives it a little bit of a pop and a little bit extra something. And then, we try to get it completely covered, but because we're going to be working in different areas, there's going to be some of those areas that dry at different rates. So we're going to get some of that blooming, but it can be really pretty. So let's go ahead and start. We need to keep in mind a few things. This blueberry, this blueberry, this blueberry, and that blueberry are too wet to really get too close to. So if I do end up making it my way there, by the time these are still wet, I need to make sure I don't touch them. I have to make sure I leave a gap on all of those edges. But I'm going to start kind of over here. Let's start over here. That'll give us the most time to kind of make our way that way. Or maybe even here. These are pretty much dry. Let's start over here. Alright, starting here. I am going to wash my brush so I know that I have nice clean colors. And I think my general plan is to try to put, this is going to vary a little bit, but I want to do this kind of tealy green color around, especially where there are a lot of the watermelon, but in these groups of these blueberries, I kind of want to put the yellow next to it because I think it'll really make them pop out. I'm not entirely sure if it will, but that's just kind of my gut feeling. Alright, so we've got this greeny, tealy color here. Just go ahead and put it on. Pop it on. And since I went over the out of the lines there, I am going to try to cover that up with that color. Maybe grab a little water so you get a little variation in color. And you can see here, I am trying to get a nice line around these, but I'm not being super duper careful. Just kind of letting it happen. I'm trying not to let any one place sit and get too dry at any time. So drying my brush off because I want to transition over to this yellow color. Yeah, I don't know if I like this. Ooh, we're going to see. We're going to see what happens here. I'm not sure. I'm crazy about these two colors together. I'm going to try it though. So this one and this one are still pretty wet, so I'm going to wait. And when we're doing our backgrounds, we want to try to keep all the edges pretty wet because it will help us actually make so that we don't have harsh lines in our background. So just every once in a while kind of touch some of those areas that have been sitting for a little bit longer. I think this teal color is much nicer, so I think I'm going to mainly put that. I'm going to put that over this. It can be a little bit more green there. I'm just not crazy about that yellow. That was a bad choice. It's okay. We make questionable color choices sometimes when we're painting. Sometimes they pay off and sometimes they don't. I think the yellow would have been nice without the green, like a yellow and orange would have been good too. But I am liking how that glow is there. That's nice. So maybe I'll drop in a little yellow every once in a while just to give it a little variation. Again, you can see how I try to kind of manage the edges here. And every once in a while I'm just putting some water in to give it a little variation. Let's go around that blueberry. These don't need to be perfect. That's the lesson of today. Aim for imperfection. What do I prefer to paint more, flowers or fruits? I don't know. It kind of just depends on my mood. I really like painting landscapes too. It is summertime though, and in summertime you really need some really yummy fruit, you know? Okay. See, that edge was about to be too dry there. So we need to make sure we try not to have them dry. I think the yellow's kind of working. I think as it dries it'll be a little bit nicer too. Let's put some of this down here. Manage your edges here. I'm just adding in more and more water here so that I have kind of a nice lighter area of this background, and then let's go in and put some of this darker color here. You know, there's not a lot of rhyme or reason to a lot of what I'm doing here. It's just kind of what feels right. And maybe I actually want to wash my brush off and pop in a little bit. I do kind of like it around those blueberries, pop in a little bit of that brighter color there. Yeah, I wasn't super crazy about it, but I'm kind of liking it around the blueberries. Now, these two blueberries here are still pretty wet, so I need to be careful here. Need to make sure that I'm not touching them, or I'm going to get that green and yellow in there, which, you know, maybe it would look nice, but that's not what I want to happen, so I'm trying to avoid it. Well, before that dries over there, make sure to manage the edge. There we go. We're getting close. We're getting close. You know, by letting ourselves just not be perfect, backgrounds are one of the most intimidating parts I find for painting. So if we accept imperfection in the background and kind of almost shoot for it, it's going to make us more likely to actually do it. Which can really make a world of difference. Like, I think that this, you know, is really, really improved by adding a background to it. So, and if I had wanted to outline these all 100% perfectly, I wouldn't have done it. I would have been too nervous to do it. So dropping in a little bit more of that yellow because I do like that. Cool. All right, there is painting number 1. Let's do the oranges because the citrus fruits are kind of fun to paint, and it will allow me to show you this little trick I have. So I'm going to set this to the side, let the background kind of dry. We're getting a couple interesting effects going on here. Okay, so one of the questions was how to not see your drawing underneath. There are a couple things you can do. You can draw really lightly, and then you can take like a one of these kneaded erasers, like this, and then just pat it so you get most of the graphite out. But watercolor pencils. I bought these years ago. I rarely use them. I'm trying to get more into the habit of it. If I draw with this, I can make it melt into the background. So let's draw with it. I'm going to use the orange. I'm hoping you guys are going to be able to see this. I don't know if you will. Maybe I should actually use, maybe I'll use a red color or slightly darker. This is more kind of like a vermilion type color. If I were you, I would use an actual orange, but I think you'll be able to see this a little bit better if I do it this way. So let's actually make let's make oranges. Let's do a big round orange here. Again, I'm not super concerned with perfection in this. If you are, you can be a little more careful with that, but oranges aren't typically perfectly round. And let's actually imagine that this one is still kind of attached to the tree or part of it, and it's got some of these leaves in it, just to make it a little more interesting. Maybe there's another full orange down here that's kind of going off to the side, and maybe even another one up here. Now, can you even see what I'm drawing? Barely. Barely. I'm trying to draw a little bit harder, but let's draw lighter than what I'm doing. I just want to try to make sure that you can actually see what I'm doing here. And then let's put in a couple different slices, because the way we're going to paint the actual orange is going to be a little different than the way we're going to paint the slices. Let's put in a slice here. So we're going to do basically a half moon shape. And then within this half moon, we're going to make it into, like, we're going to make a rainbow almost. And then you're going to make little pizza slices from here. You could do, you know, a couple, or you can do just 3. Maybe there's actually a whole round one here. It's going to go off the page for me, though. And we're going to make that interior rim, and then we're going to turn it kind of into a bike wheel to get those slices there. And you could add more. I'm going to leave it like this just so that we don't have way too many to work with. I need to get rid of a lot of these here, and I also need to get myself some new rags, so I'm going to grab these and just do a little bit of prep. We're going to be doing some very similar things to what we did in the first one, so if you're like, I'm super over this, it's totally fine if you don't want to do this one too, but the citrus one, there are some fun parts to it, and doing a more rounded shape, there are some extra fun things we can do. Alright, cleaning this up with my very wet rag paper towel. I've been trying to switch over to using an actual rag while I paint, but a bunch of the ones I have, I wanted to use scrap fabric that I have, but they don't soak water up very well, which makes painting difficult. So I'm still searching for some scraps around that will be good for that. Orange blossoms would be pretty to add. Yes, they would. I don't actually know how to draw them. So if you know how, you should definitely add some orange blossoms. I have like a very, very vague idea of what they look like, but it's so vague that I'm not even sure it would be good to add. Let's see. Alright, trying to clean up a few of those, because I do want to mix up a decent amount of a few of these colors. Because we're mainly going to be using oranges. So let's put some clean water in here. And hopefully my water over here for my brushes looking a little dirty, but I think it will hold out for this. So let's start mixing up a couple oranges. This is I think this is vermilion here. I'm going to grab some of this vermilion. I'm going to get my tester strip so that you guys can see the colors again. So I want to make 2 to 3 orange colors. One that is maybe a little more red, and one that is a little more yellow. So this vermilion is actually kind of perfect for the more red version of the yellow. I'm just going to get it pretty saturated with this color, so I have got quite a bit to work with. There we go. That's nice. And I'm going to wash my brush off because I don't really want the red in this one, so I'm actually going to take, this other one is orange, and I've been dipping it with my blue too much, so I'm going to clean that up just a little bit because I don't really want that blue in there. There we go. Grabbing this orange color, you can see how different those two oranges are. But I'm going to also put some of this permanent yellow in there. You could also put in yellow ochre, might be kind of nice. If you wanted it to be a little bit more toned down. Ooh, yeah, that's like the perfect orange color there. I'm going to start with these two as my main colors. I will be dipping straight into some of the yellows, and I will also be shadowing this with purple because it is the, well, I mean, we're using a lot of orangey yellows here, but if we add purple into this orange that's here, we're going to get almost some extra purpley muted colors, which will be really nice because there's more red in it, and we'll get some more kind of gray tones with this more yellow type color. So that'll be kind of the perfect color to add in as our shadows. Okay, let's start with our big guy here, the main one. And let's just start by, I'm going to take this super orange color here. I'm just going to put it in a couple areas. I'm going to wash my brush because, again, remember, we want that kind of shiny area. So I'm going to bring it kind of over here. And then I'm going to grab some of this slightly darker red color. Ooh, that's doing some fun things. I'm going to put that kind of all the way down and around. I'm going to wash my brush off again. Tap it off so it's pretty much dry to kind of soften some of these edges over here. And then I want to start adding in some other bright colors. So maybe I want to actually add in a little bit of this straight yellow color into a couple areas here. You know, the light is going to reflect a little bit differently on different parts of this orange. And then while that's kind of doing its thing there, I want to grab some of this violet color here. Tap that off a little bit. And while this is still damp, I want to just put that right along the edge here. If we need to, we can wash our brush off a little bit and kind of soften that. And I think I want to drop in a little bit more of that orangish red pigment kind of here. You know, oranges have a little bit of a texture on them, so if you want to do a little bit of kind of stippling here, some of that will, you know, we're going to lose quite a bit of this as it dries, but some of it will kind of stay and hint to the texture that you've just created in there. I'm going to wash my brush off and dry it again, and I'm going to go straight into this vermilion so I have the pure pigment to put down here. Okay. Now, I kind of like what's going on up here, but it's a little bit too harsh for me, so I'm going to take a damp brush and just kind of squiggle there. And I'm also going to be trying to encourage a bloom to happen right in that area. So I'm going to wash my brush and then just take a little bit of that water and just let it do its thing. We're going to see what happens down here. I'm thinking some of these colors will kind of come together. We can always add in a second layer if we need to. This one here, the real shadowy part probably wouldn't be seen, so let's just drop in some of this real orangey color. Oh, I think I'm doing some of this off camera, sorry. Some of that reddish orange. And then let's just put a little bit of that yellow on our brush. And just put it kind of here. And then I'm going to take a damp, clean brush and just kind of connect those two together. Pick up a little bit of that pigment. And see how there's that watercolor pencil here? If you want to try to help it go away, you can kind of paint that away, and it will just kind of go into nothingness almost there. So you can't even really see it at all. I need to put a little bit more of this orangey color down here. Maybe actually grab some of that orange. Maybe do a little bit of that kind of stippling. Dry your brush if you want to do them smaller. And then I'm going to just let that chill for a little bit and see what happens to it. All right, so for the actual orange slices, we're going to do a couple things. One you're going to be pretty familiar with because we kind of did it on the watermelon rind. So we're going to do a swipe of orange. We're going to wash our brush, make it damp, and then swipe it right next to it so it creates a really slight gradient. But the other part we're going to do is a little bit of layering too. So let's actually start with the layering because this is one of the newer concepts. Grab either one of these here. Maybe do the orangey orange one. And we want to make sure we're working in the direction of kind of the way the pulp would be in these. So in these cross sections here, each one of these segments should be at least a little separated because there's usually a little white film in between all the segments of the orange. You're sold on the pencils? Good, good. And I'm sure there are like really nice watercolor pencils versus cheap ones. Whatever ones I had were just the cheapest ones I could find, and since I only use them for sketching, they last forever. But if anybody has recommendations for watercolor pencils, let me know. All right, so we want to make sure that the pulp is kind of all aligned in the same direction because pulp kind of goes in this way. But we just want to make a few pulp marks in each one of these. So we're following the lines for all of these to kind of create some pulp. And we're actually going to let these dry in between our layers, which is why we're kind of starting on them now. Make sure you leave some white space. But just add in, hello, hello. Add in a little bit of that pulp. Alright, so we might also see something interesting happen here. I still have some standing water here, and since I moved this around so that I can get the right direction of these, this might bleed up a little bit, and it could be kind of cool. So let's just find out what happens. Adding in a little bit of that pulp. Again, move in the direction of the slice. The little orange segment. Oh, nice. Okay, so there's a good suggestion for watercolor pencils in the comments. All right, so this one we want to do, this is another full orange, but it's going to actually have a little bit more of the darkness because we've kind of designated the dark part to be down here. So let's start. I'm going to do this one. I'm letting these dry where I made those marks on them, and I'm going to let them dry while I work on some of this other stuff because we're going to do a second layer on that. Okay, so I'm going to grab my orange, and I'm actually just going to put this over basically the whole thing because this is the dark side of of the orange rather than the dark side of the moon. Grab some of the vermilion. Ooh, I love some of these colors have this really interesting effect where they kind of spread. And you can see here I'm just kind of putting the brush how I want it, how I feel like putting it. There's not a lot of rhyme or reason. Put a little bit of that violet color down at the bottom because this is the dark side of the orange. I'm going to drop in a little bit more of that vermilion color. And let's just let that kind of chill out there. Okay. We can also, if this orange is dry enough, you can add in some of your leaves. I'm just going to do that with, I think this is a sap green, so I'm just going to put some water in my sap green. And I'm just going to add in these leaves. Being careful not to touch too much of that, and then we can either add in some darker parts to kind of further define parts of these leaves, or we can lift out if we want to highlight parts, or you can do a little bit of both. I'm actually going to take some of that blue and kind of highlight under parts so that we can kind of see the different parts of this. Maybe grab some of this Viridian green while it's still kind of wet. Maybe even encourage a little bit of blooming by dropping some water into these. You don't have to, but I feel like it, so I'm going to. Okay. All right, our first layer, if you did a nice light layer of these first little wow, I was just saying that word. What is it called? The little nodes in the orange? No, that's not the word. Wow, it's totally escaped me. Anyways, I'm going to do this with this more vermilion color, and I'm going to only do a couple in each one of these. So I'm only going to do about pulp. Thank you. Thank you so much. It was like the word just like ran away from my head for a second. All right, so I'm going to do just a couple of these. I just want a couple darker ones, so nowhere near as many as the first one. Turn this around so I can get the direction. We're just trying to get some variation of color here, you know? All right, before I do anything else to those slices, I want this to be a little darker on the bottom of this one, so I'm going to grab some more of this violet color. And mine is still damp, so this will work pretty nice on mine, but I'm just going to really lightly touch right on the edge there. Okay, now what we want to do is do that very similar thing that we did to the watermelon rinds, where we're going to encourage the outside to be a little bit brighter, and then we're going to wash our brush and create that little bit of a gradient. So you can take whichever ones you want. I typically like to use the more orangey orange one for this, but you know, that's just me, so I'm going to put that right along the edge here. And you want to keep this kind of wet, kind of dry, kind of in between. Wash your brush off, and then touch right along it. And if you want to add some more brightness to this, you could maybe pop in, while it's still a little bit wet, a little bit of yellow mixed in with your orangey color. That might give you some extra pop to that color. And then we're going to do the same thing over here. I already have some yellow in there, but I'm not going to wash that out because I kind of like it. Washed and kind of dried my brush off. There we go. We can add in, if we want, we can add some of those darker colors right along the edge. Okay, now the last thing we're going to do for the pulpy bits, or the different orange segments, is the way that oranges are, you know, they are really compact and they fit in there. But if you take a cross section of an orange, I mean, it's basically like a bike tire, you know, like this, or like a pizza. But the one difference is, if we were to pull these out, there's that pulp kind of fills in, so they kind of go like this. There's almost like a flower shape in between. And because these separating segments here, or the film that's between them, it usually doesn't, it's white. So we kind of want to go in each one of these and with this kind of almost petal-like shape, which you can kind of see here, and that gives us some of the lightness that's actually in oranges without it, you know, looking like it's all smooshed together. So we want to make sure our little pulpy bits, thank you for the pulp, are dry enough. And then I want to do this with a little bit lighter, a little bit more yellow color, because I want it to kind of feel like the light is kind of shining through this. So I'm going to, There's too much green in this one, so I'm just going to add some more water to this because I'm actually done with this orange color. And I'm going to grab just some of this yellow. And if I just take that top part there, it should be a little bit lighter, maybe a little more. There, that's nice. Okay, so we've kind of talked about the shape of these, but we don't necessarily want to cover up the entire thing with the shape. Oh, hello, Sarah, how are you? Because we want there to be a little light reflecting on these. So we're just kind of creating little segments here. If you've got too much in one, you can actually grab it and put it in the other one. And, you know, if you need to, because you don't like those lines, you could go ahead and bring those up to some of those and then maybe make the next one over the one with the gap, kind of alternate them. You can see I filled my brush with one and I'm just kind of transferring it from one segment to the other. Here we go. Thanks. All right, let's do the same thing over here. Then it'll be time for a background. And I'm thinking a bluish purple for this one. Okay. There, look. Super easy peasy. I think with watercolor, it's so easy to overthink a lot of these things. Just make them simple, you know? All right, let's mix up a purple and a blue to do our background with. I'm going to do that in this one. Oh, there's already water in that one, so let's do it in this one. I mean, phthalo blue is my favorite, so of course I'm going to put some phthalo blue in there. That's a pretty nice color, maybe a little more pigmented, maybe a little bit more muted. Let's actually do that with this. Is this sienna something raw umber? I don't know. I don't know. I'm losing it. I'm gonna add in a little bit of that color though. It's like red ochre. That's what it is. Thank you. There we go. Yes. Ooh, that steely color there is good. And then let's do kind of a purple-y color here, grabbing some of that violet. Maybe a little more. Maybe a little of this magenta color. Maybe a little bit of this same phthalo blue so that we've got kind of some similar color themes, a little more of that magenta. Let's test that color. Oh yeah, I think that's nice. All right, so we're gonna make our background with these two colors here. And again, you know, we're going for a fun background. This is a playful painting. It does not need to be perfect. The real thing that we just want to be careful of is making sure that the edges of whatever we're painting on do stay nice and wet so that we don't get lines. I'm just going to kind of go back and forth between adding in some blue and some purple, maybe even going in with a little water to give a little more variation. And on some places it's going to touch, some places it's not going to touch, and that's totally fine. Just work back and forth so that you keep kind of all the edges wet so that you don't get the lines if you don't want them. If you want them, then go for it. Add in some water. Add And some blue, I don't know. Do whatever you want, you know. This is your painting. Obviously the best art teacher thing. Do whatever you want. Also, I'm not holding it in frame, I don't think. Okay. Just working back and forth with some of these colors, trying to make sure I don't leave any of these edges to dry for too long. Let's go into this purple now. And again, I'm going to move my painting around so that it is easier for me to work on. Forgot about over there a little bit. That's all right. Again, we don't want to let those edges set for too long or they will be pretty distracting. At least for me. There we go. And there's our second painting. So when I paint something super wet like this, it is best if you can. Oh, I totally forgot. Oh no. I forgot the background over here. That's too bad. This color is going to be hard to attain. I might have to try to mix that up and get more of that there. I do recommend if you paint something super wet like this, let it chill out before you try to take the tape off. When the top layer of this will seem dry, there will be some under parts of the painting that are still a little bit wet, and that makes your paper more susceptible to tearing when you take the tape off. Even if you're using the little hairdryer trick, that definitely helps, but you're still a little bit more at risk of this. So if I were you, I would just let this chill out for an hour or so before you actually try to take any of the tape off. Again, that's going to conclude today's lesson. I really appreciate you guys being here. If you want, it really does brighten my day if you send me pictures, Lacey Walker Art or Rebel Unicorn Crafts in Instagram, or you can make a video. It's kind of fun sometimes to make a video. I hope everybody has a really good day, and I hope you enjoyed today's class. So thank you so much, and I hope to see you next week.